And on the first episode of Kokoon for this year, 2025, we're so lucky to have Alex Zervakos, co-founder and CEO at Theryo. So thank you so much, Alex, for joining us on our very first episode for the year.
Hi, Karen. Thank you. I'm glad to be here and happy to start the year off with you.
Excellent. And I can't wait to hear more about Theryo, where you've sort of combined AI and mental health. But before we sort of get onto that, and I'm sure we'll get to that point eventually, I always like to kick off my interviews by asking our guests how your journey began working in the wellness industry.
My journey probably started a little different. It started out of necessity, I think. 3 years ago, I started with a mental health journey, and turns out that I had depression, and then I never clicked with a therapist. I kept seeing different ones. So I saw the first one and saw a second one, and then, continued on. I went through 4 therapists and just nothing felt right. I didn't seem to be improving. I didn't feel good about it. And one day I just thought maybe AI, because I was in AI, I was working in that field. I thought maybe AI can help me get through this and learn a little bit more. And through that, I developed some tools. And with those tools, that helped me in therapy. And then I found a therapist who was willing to work with AI and the tools that I developed. And the feedback that I was getting from the therapist was, they were kind of shocked and amazed at what was happening. And then that, AI and the results and the working with my therapist, that just helped me a lot. And, actually get diagnosed with, instead of depression, which was my initial diagnosis, with ADHD that I've had since I was a child that I didn't know of. So that feedback and that journey led to creating more tools, and with a co-founder that we built the tools together. That started Theryo, and that's my journey, the beginning of the journey in mental health and wellness.
And tell me more about Theryo. So tell me what it actually does, without, of course, jeopardizing your IP or anything. But
oh, no.
How does AI help in that way?
It's a platform that we developed. We're going to be launching it soon. We just finished our second round of beta testing. And what it is that it's got 2 purposes. It's to make mental health more collaborative and more accessible. So on the patient or the client side, there's daily journaling that they do, and then AI kind of analyzes that and then gives them some education and some guidance on, or feedback and guidance on, maybe what they should talk about in therapy. And then on the therapist side, it will transcribe the sessions and then do an analysis and then create the notes in more detail with an analysis of what's going on. And a really interesting part of it that helps a lot is that it links, the session today with the session yesterday or last week and the previous session. So it gives the therapist more memory and it analyzes all of the different sessions together so that it can help them plan a better path forward and to work with the patient or the client. And then because the client has feedback from their journaling, they can kind of go into their next session with more of a plan or more of some topics or things to discuss. So that's where the feedback, the 2-way feedback helps. So it's making the initial feedback we're getting is it's making a big difference, both for patients and for therapists.
It sounds like so much more productive. I've had therapy as well. And yeah, it just feels like you sort of go and you sort of let it, tell us, unload on the health professional and the therapist, and then you go, see you next time, and then that's it. So for me, sometimes it felt like I was just sort of catching up and saying what happened since I was last there, rather than actually having some structure to it.
Well, that's when I tell people my story. That's a lot of the exact same feedback is people go in and talk for an hour and then they leave and they're not sure if it was right or anything happened. And you don't really get a lot of feedback unless your therapist gives you that feedback. You don't know, what's happening or if it's helping you. And a lot of times you leave therapy and you don't have you're not taking notes. So you don't remember everything that happened and what you discussed. So this just helps guide you along a little bit more, give you more feedback and gives you kind of some input on, what's happened, what's been happening, and, maybe what you can talk about to further that along. So I find it helpful. A lot of people find it helpful, and it's good because like what you just said, that's what happened to me. And that's what I'm hearing happens to a lot of people in therapy.
And I guess too, as a therapist, I'm not a therapist, but I could only imagine that if you're a therapist who's seeing client after client after client, it's just very hard for you to then to sort of take a step back and then look at all of those sessions and analyze and find the themes and that sort of thing to actually pull out to keep moving along. Just having that sort of window, that space to sit in that data and make sense of it.
Yeah, that's some of the feedback that we've got from some of the therapists is they're frustrated with that a little bit too, is because a lot of times you get referred to a therapist from a friend, or you find something online and they sound good, but it's just kind of, you pick one, you go in, you tell them your story, and you spend a couple of sessions. So it takes time both on the patient side and on the therapist side. So for therapists, it's a difficult job. There's a lot of burnout. There's not enough therapists. There's not enough for the demand that's there. So a lot of therapists feel that, not that they're wasting their time, but they could use their time a lot better if there was a better connection, a better introduction to that. And then also with AI and with our platform, what we do with the patients is there's an onboarding or an initial journey that they take that asks a bunch of questions, and the patient goes through it, and then it generates kind of a patient or a user profile that can be shared with the therapist. So if they're looking for a therapist, that gives them kind of gives them a background of who the patient is, and they can kind of decide together if they're a good fit, if it would work. So it can save some time and speed along the journey, the initial part of the journey a bit.
That's so good. And my other question is the AI trained on what sort of data is the AI trained on? Is it from sort of psychology and psychiatry and those sorts of sources?
Yeah, it's a lot of prompting and proprietary methodology that we have that we've incorporated with standard AI, so that it's focused on specific fields and questions and doesn't kind of deviate outside of that. So it focuses on that. But what's really important is that AI needs to be used ethically and responsibly. So just like regular use outside of healthcare or mental health, somebody has to oversee it. Somebody has to pay attention to it, not just follow it blindly. And our platform, and I think a lot of AI products that are out there for mental health, they should definitely be worked in conjunction with a therapist, with a professional. So there's some oversight there that, so that if AI does say something that's wrong or hurtful, that there's somebody there to double check it and make sure it's safe.
Having that subject matter expert in the loop. And my sorry, I'm so interested in this. So my other question is, so do the client and the therapist get to see each other's notes?
There's some sharing going on. So on the therapist side, just like a regular doctor's office, they take their notes and their medical records are private. And then the journaling that happens, though, the daily journaling and the analysis of that by AI, the patient can choose to share that with the therapist. So it's their choice. But we found where the real power comes in is when the patient does, or the user does, share their journal summaries with the therapist. Because what it does is it gives the therapist insight into everything outside of that 50 minutes that they never have access to. So when you come in, when a patient comes in, usually spending 15, 20 minutes, maybe sometimes more, just saying, what happened since the last session. So it eats up part of that, a third of that 50 minutes. And it's just kind of what the patient or the user or the client remembers. So what's nice about AI, and when they share that summary over, is the therapist gets a big look into what happened in the previous week. And then those summaries get analyzed with the therapist notes, and that way the two come out together. So the therapist gets more insight, more analysis, more details, and that helps them plan, the next session and the path forward.
Excellent. It sounds wonderful. I can't wait to see it released. I think it's going to be very, very successful.
Thank you.
Now, I want to ask you some questions about you. So my other question is, I'll continue on asking. So clearly, are you building this AI as your full-time main work, or are you doing it as well as other work?
It's a big project that we have. So it's that my co-founder Kanji, he's working at it full time. I'm doing some other things right now currently, but the plan is to go over into it full time. And the big plan is I think there's like global potential for it. We want to help as many people as we can and make mental health more accessible. And so we want to sell that and make money off of it. And our big mission is that we feel there's a big need in schools and underserved communities where they don't have access to mental health. They don't have access to resources like this. And in schools where, especially in an underserved community, there might be a school with 500 or 1,000 students and one guidance counselor who doesn't have all of the training that a therapist might have. And that one person is like the town or the area's only resource. So again, they can't help as many people as they want to. They might not be able to see as many children as they can. So we want to be able to give the platform to them for free or, highly discounted. So we have big plans with it, and it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of focus.
Absolutely. And so now that you're sort of juggling multiple things to get this going, how do you maintain your energy levels? So how are you coping with juggling so much?
It's an interesting question because I only recently found out the answer to that through using the AI tools, the platform, and AI. So I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I didn't know I had it since I was a kid. And one of my big things is I needed high pressure and I needed stress and a lot of activity and excitement to keep going. So maybe in an unhealthy way, I had a self-coping mechanism to just keep going. So if I was busy and excited doing what I was doing, I had a lot of energy. And then when those projects or that excitement kind of died down, I kind of crashed. So I was always fluctuating between working at 110% and then down to like 20%. So it's been a little bit of a struggle. And, thanks to the AI and what we're doing, I learned about that with the therapist. So it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, and just aside, when you learned your actual diagnosis and the correct diagnosis, did you feel relieved? Was it like that's what's been happening for so long? How did you feel?
It was a little scary at the beginning because I was getting all these terms and getting ADHD and depression and everything. But once I had better understood it, it definitely was a relief. And it helps me understand what's been going on and how I've been dealing with things and how those self-coping mechanisms broke down and how to rebuild them and how to work with them. So it's been a very positive journey.
Yeah. Excellent. And so my next question, we've talked about the rapid evolution of AI. Well, we've talked about Theryo, but let's talk about, we were just discussing before we went to air, just how many changes have happened in the last few weeks. So how are you feeling about this rapid change in AI evolution, and also any other ways you've seen AI being used well in the wellness and health and wellness space?
Since it came out and been more publicly available, I've been super excited about AI for the past 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And then I think just more lately, just more excited, more curious about what's going to be coming, because literally every single week there's a major new announcement or a major new product that comes out. So you almost never know what's going to come out. And once you think you have a product or a software that you like and you want to use and it can help you, next week something else comes out and everything changes. So I think the advancement in the past 2 years has been phenomenal. It's been lightning fast, but I think this year especially, it's going to be exponentially grow compared to what we've seen in the past year and 2 years.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And they've said that. Like I remember hearing an interview with it was from the guys from the Marketing AI Institute, and they were saying they were talking to people at the actual AI platforms, and they were saying that last year was a bit slow, and it's because everyone's been working on some major things, and then this year is when it's going to happen. So yeah. And have you seen any other great ways that AI is being used in the health and wellness space?
I think I've seen it used for helplines. There's a little bit of difficulty with that and challenges when you're actually giving mental health advice with it. But I think that's going to expand. There's going to be a lot of assistance that will be provided from that. So you'll be able to get 24/7 help, like therapy help when it's needed. So that again will open up, I think, the market so that it's more accessible. It's be able to get it anytime you need, and that'll also help mental health professionals. It's good. I think also there's already products now and they're getting better and better for therapists to take their notes. So they takes their notes so they don't have to sit there and do it. therapists take, a few notes. Some of them do it after the session. I think this will help them, save them time. They'll get better notes because it'll be the whole session.
Yeah.
So I think that's another positive thing with AI that's going to come out. And I think there's some new, and it's also, I've seen products and studies where AI is being used to identify mental illness a lot quicker than humans can do. And in hospitals are using it or doing research on it to be able to, when they admit a patient, see if there's suicidal ideologies. So AI can identify it much, much quicker. And sometimes a little bit more detail. And so it's better for hospitals, better for the healthcare professionals, and also for the patients, because they can be diagnosed quicker and more accurately and get treatment faster. So I think a lot of really positive benefits to AI in the mental wellness space.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you as well, so I see we met through social media. So and social media is now such a big part of business and promoting a business and connecting, with people who could potentially be your clients or customers, or who are existing customers. But the thing is, it can be also not so positive in terms of the time it takes and being glued to your phone and those sorts of things. So how do you navigate your own wellness in terms of being online and on social media and sort of taking a break? Do you have any sort of rules that you have for yourself around how you use technology and not use the technology?
Well, I wish I could use kind of some of the rules we use with my son, where there's kind of timers and limit to what he does. With business, it's difficult. You got to be on social media a lot. So like for Theryo, we're mindful of that, and we try to work very hard to everything that we post has a positive message for mental wellness. So that's good. And even the people that work in our marketing, they find it beneficial because the messages they read, it has positive little micro tips. So I think it's important to kind of vary your subject matter and get some helpful, positive social media. And in my case, I found myself where I go on and I kind of go on a roar and just kind of focus on one thing that's probably not doing any good other than wasting time. So I try to be conscious of that and limit my time outside of work on social media. It's not always easy, but I try to make a conscious effort not to sit there and spend hours on something. And if I catch myself, I'd be like, no, you got to get off and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, no, that's good. I often ask because everyone's got some people are just like, oh, I don't care. Then others are very, very regimented in. I put it in my phone in the other room before I go to sleep, and all sorts of rules around that.
I think I'm kind of in the middle of there. I'm not on either end. I'm kind of in the middle. Hopefully, it's a happy medium.
Yeah, that sounds good. I wanted to ask you, and without, of course, breaching confidentiality, do you have any inspirational breakthroughs or transformations that you've experienced or heard about from someone who's using Theryo?
Well, I mean, I think one of the most positive so far is my own journey. My co-founder Kanji, I mean, he also went through kind of a similar adventure or journey in mental health. So again, AI, the tools that we built, they also helped him a lot. So I mean, I think the two of us are the two biggest positive outcomes of it so far. But a lot of the people that are just journaling, they find it very insightful. They get a lot more insight into what their day-to-day activities are, what the emotions mean, what the anger, the frustration means. So there's I think a lot of little positive effects from each user that's using it, both on the client side, the patient side, individual, and also on the therapist side. Therapists like it because there's more information. There's some almost like self-reflection there, because when the session notes are generated, the AI will give the therapist some feedback on the session and what happened in it. So we've gotten some really good feedback from therapists as well, that they're getting feedback on their session and how they interact with the patient that they never really had before, because they never thought about it, never received that feedback because there's nobody else in the room ever.
Yeah, that's so true. And I mean, I love the way that AI can give you just a completely different perspective on something. And Yeah, that sounds like an amazing sort of outcome that maybe you didn't expect when you're actually building the technology.
Not initially, no. And I think it came out, there was some therapists that were working with the product, and they were kind of shocked that they got some of the feedback from AI and from the platform. And they're like, I never realized I did that, and they made a conscious effort to change some of the things they were doing in therapy with their patients. So it was a unintended positive side effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to ask you about goals for this year. And whenever I ask this question for this podcast, there's usually two camps, or there's a spectrum. Some people are sort of anti-goal, and they're like, I just like to see how things unfold. And then others are like, no, I set goals at the start of the year, so I've got something to aim for. What camp are you in? And if you are a goal setter, what goals have you planned for this year, or what are you striving for?
A lot of the goals are revolve around Theryo. So we finished our second round of beta testing at the end of December. Right now, we got a lot of feedback from our users, and we're evaluating that. We're incorporating some of the suggestions. So our first goal is to update the product with the feedback, make it better. The next goal is to launch it publicly, so it's publicly available. And the third goal that's really important to us, that I mentioned earlier, is to start sharing the product with the underserved communities and with schools. So we're looking at that now, and communities that we could start sharing that with, because we think, in addition to helping and sharing with a lot of other people that are regular users and therapists, that the schools and underserved communities, that'll make a big effect, a big difference.
Yeah, that's great. They're great goals to have. And are you're on track?
We're on track so far. Yeah, it looks good. And just to share, I was telling someone, a doctor, the other day about the product. They were asking us about it. They actually saw your post on LinkedIn about this podcast. So they looked into it. And then when I saw them, they said, hey, I looked you up and I saw this. And when I told them about the product and what we wanted to do with it with schools, they said their mother is a guidance counselor at a school in a small community in New Mexico. And she's the only resource for the whole community. And she had a student that was younger many years ago and saw her and had mental health issues. And one night, just recently, that student, who's now an adult, knocked on her door in the middle of the night, and it was having a mental health crisis. And he went to her because he was the only person he knew to go to. So that kind of reinforces our big goal of being able to help schools and help communities, is that there really is a lot of times just that one person who's there to help. So this could give them more bandwidth and more, maybe more guidance or educational information to help. Yeah,
that's great. And I'm sure you'll do it. It's going to make such a big impact on the community and around the communities around the world, which is fantastic. Now, I have one final question to ask you. So I'd like you to reflect on going back to the beginning of your career. What do you wish you knew at the beginning of your career that you know now? If you could go back in time and tell yourself anything, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, geez. So going back, I think there's two parts of this. Going back when I was younger, starting in my career, I had a problem with delegating. I would never delegate anything, or it was very difficult for me to delegate. So I think, learning how to delegate and actually doing it, letting go, I think, is something that I would tell myself. And even now, more recently, learning about the ADHD and how my ADHD affected me, that, I needed that high pressure. I needed that stress to function, well. So learning about that, like, delegating and why I couldn't delegate, I'm learning now why I couldn't do it. So I worked hard to be able to do that. I probably still have a little bit more work to do with it, but that's the one thing that I think I would tell myself about, starting my career, is find good people and delegate to them.
Good advice. I think I need to take that on a bit myself.
Well, it would have saved me a lot of stress and a lot of worry.
Yeah. And so thank you. Are there any final things you'd like to let the audience know before we wrap up?
I just think if you're thinking about, whether you're an individual, a patient, a therapist, if you're thinking about, in the wellness field, about using AI at all, I definitely think it's a good thing to look into. But I definitely think it's also something that needs to be, if you have a mental health issue and you need that that therapy, it shouldn't be used solely as a tool to replace therapy. It should be used with the therapist in conjunction with them. So the therapist can help you, and you can also have that two-way collaboration and help the therapist to learn more about yourself.
Excellent. Great advice. And watch out for Theryo. So
Great.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Thank you so much.
And thanks everyone for watching. And we'll be back next month with episode 5, which will be the second episode for 2025. Thanks, everyone.
Good. Thank you.